Hello and welcome to GIS for Public Information and Stakeholder Engagement. This is the third in our series of incident management team and disaster preparedness webinars, part of our overall public safety webinar series. We use these webinars to promote the use of GIS in public safety to support response, recovery, and preparedness. We're excited today to talk about the importance of public information and stakeholder engagement. You'll see a lot that lean towards the public information officer and liaison officer as workflows to support their requirements during deployment. And we're excited to have some personnel from CAL FIRE that deal with this on a regular basis. As many of you know, the responsibilities of CAL FIRE during significant events like wildland fire incidents or flooding and earthquakes is impressive in that they use the technology in a way that supports the public taking action to save lives and property, and also keeping that information flow about the incident status, conditions affecting a community, and keeping stakeholders informed, such as elected officials, and participating in supporting agencies. So we'll start with some housekeeping. Initially, that the control panel for GoToWebinar, please enter any questions in the chat function there. We'll attempt to get to all those questions before the end of the webinar. If we do not, we will follow up and reach out to the individual questioners. And also, there will be an email following up with pertinent links and the recording for the webinar in case you want to share that with anyone. But we'll get into introductions, and part of our public safety staff is joining us today to provide some solutions and best practices for public information and stakeholder engagement. And I'll turn it over to Jeff Barani first for introductions. Jeff.
Thanks, Mike. Good morning, everyone. Jeff Barani, Emergency Management Tech Lead and part of our disaster response program here at Esri. Over to you, Fern.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm Fern. I'm Esri's Wildland Fire Specialist, which means I get to work with agencies around the world who are using GIS to help prepare for, respond, and recover from wildfires. I'm also part, along with Jeff, of our core team on our Esri disaster response program. I'm thrilled to have Frank and Will joining us today from CAL FIRE. Frank, would you mind introducing yourself next?
Hello, everybody. My name is Frank Bigelow. I'm the Deputy Chief with CAL FIRE. In my current role, I oversee 4 statewide programs, and those programs are our defensible space inspection, our damage inspection process, our new program, our home hardening program, as well as our utility fire mitigation program, dealing with the investor-owned utilities such as PG&E and SCE for compliance as it relates to PSPS events. With me today is my colleague Will, so I'll pass it to Will.
Thank you, Frank. I'm Will Brewer. I'm the primary GIS support for the damage inspection program, whose content I help manage, as you'll see here shortly.
Thanks, Chief. Thanks, Will. And I am Mike Cox. I'm your Director of Fire and EMS Solutions for Esri. I come to you after 27 years in a metro-sized department in Central Virginia, where I retired as a Deputy Chief. And consider me your Fire GIS Liaison Officer. So certainly you'll have our contact information during this presentation and after, and reach out at any point if you need help implementing these solutions or just have general questions. And we talk about public information and stakeholder engagement in this context as part of that incident management process. And GIS is well suited to support that incident management process through the collection of data, analysis, supporting decision-making with verified data, and then the ability to share that data to whoever you deem appropriate. So it really gives a good picture of what are the risks, who's being impacted, where is that impact occurring? And we can bring together various data sets to build these visual products to help people make decisions, and bringing together data like UAS visual data, bringing together CAD data or building information data, and all the way down to tracking personnel down to a device level, AVL data, and certainly 3D modeling. And the ability to share these products that you build for your agency is enhanced by the fact that Esri has a presence in nearly every public safety agency domestically and a large percentage worldwide. So certainly at a regional, state, or federal government level or national level, you'll have those capabilities existing. So many of you online today that are part of a local government agency likely already have access to most of the capabilities we're going to show today. So keep that in mind as we go through these workflows. In addition, we're going to talk a lot today about wildland events, but I want to make sure everyone understands that this is an all hazards application. So whether we're talking about public information leading up to and during a hurricane and the recovery period after, post earthquake, or educating the public and how to respond to these known risks ahead of time, and part of that community risk reduction, and having them develop the ability to support themselves during a significant event. We see GIS used over and over in that all hazards environment. So, depending on what your IMT is deployed for, will dictate, what data you may need to help you make those decisions. So whether we're talking about, a fire response or an earthquake or a flood or even a special event management incident, GIS will support the, preparedness, response, and after action activities related to these responses. And we do support IMTs through several capabilities I'm going to discuss here. But the first I want to talk about is the Living Atlas. And the Living Atlas is something that you have access to now, and please take a look at it, and you'll get a link to some of these resources again after the webinar. But Living Atlas provides thousands and thousands of data sets that can support you in your decision making and communication with the public or stakeholders. And it includes things like real-time data, such as traffic and weather, and certainly risk data, including things like wildland-urban interface issues, earthquake areas, high risk for flooding, and the impact of tropical storm systems. And you can start to see where are the most people impacted by these events. So not just what's happening, but where is it happening and who is it happening to. An additional way we support incident management teams is through our disaster response program. The disaster response program is staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And by going to the disaster response program website, you can actually request assistance simply by clicking on the request assistance button. And it allows you to get support, whether it's additional software, technical support, or direct support to your incident management team. And again, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And Fern and Jeff can speak further to that, or if you have any questions, certainly reach out about the disaster response program. But today we want to concentrate on public information and stakeholder engagement. And we see how important that is with significant incidents like wildland issues, where we have to be able to communicate with the public, have them take action, and provide verified data, appropriate data to those citizens, taxpayers, and residents of the area to take appropriate action, again, to either protect their lives or help support property protection. And the verified data part is what's key here, is to be able to bring together data sets that are appropriate for the specific incident, even though not all hazards approach, and the ability to push that out through cloud-based services to the public. So the ability to share across jurisdictional boundaries is incredibly important because, as you know, incidents don't concern themselves with jurisdictional boundaries. So an evacuation zone in one city or county, if not shared appropriately, may appear to end at the city or county line. And we really need to have the ability to have those individual agencies coordinate their release of public information and make sure that verified information is out to the public in that appropriate manner. And another chief concern with public information is scalability. And what you see here is an evacuation map from a hurricane season in the state of Florida. And these information products can be picked up and go viral very quickly. And you can see here, this evacuation map got millions of hits in just a couple of days. And a lot of times local infrastructure won't be able to support that kind of scalability. So it's important to have the ability to use cloud-based services to be able to push out these products and make sure that it's a consistent, successful approach to getting the information to the right person at the right time. And we see over and over applications used for briefings. So whether it's an operational brief within the IMT operational period, or briefing the public or elected officials or other stakeholders. Here's an example from the state of Arizona Emergency Management Agency, where they're briefing stakeholders using a story map concept in the tab story map. And we'll show some very simple ways to develop these products that you can use during your response to brief whatever stakeholders, participants, or elected officials you may need to. And another capability that many are employing now, particularly during a disaster and directly after, is crowdsourcing or two-way communication with the public. We used to say, if you see something, say something. Well, now we can say, if you see something, type something. And these apps are able to receive imagery and photos from the public. They can start to indicate where are the most areas of damage, where do we need to focus resources during our response, and what is the impact to the community as assessed by the folks living in the community, which can be valuable information as you're planning your response or planning your recovery efforts or damage assessment efforts. So I'm going to turn it over now to Chief Bigelow and Specialist Brewer to talk about their use of public information products in the field during significant events, and particularly keeping the public informed during damage assessment activities. So Will, I'll turn it over to you, and Chief Bigelow, please go ahead.
Well, thank you for that, and welcome everybody again, and thank you, Esri, for allowing us to come show all of you our process of post-emergency data collection and sharing. What we'll be showing you today is when, how, as well as to whom we share the data with. I think it is important first to talk about how we got here as a department. CAL FIRE started using the Collector app, an Esri product, for post-fire emergency data collection on the Butte fire in 2014. From that fire and a few others that year, we were able to learn a lot about the field collection process, both working in a connected and offline environment, as well as data governance, management, and sharing. Over the years, we've evolved with the changes in technology, but have chosen to stay and continue to use Esri and Collector as our primary data collection medium. Although this year we will again be adapting with technology and moving to the latest Esri product, Field Maps. As you can imagine, in 2021, the ability to instantly share and present data has become more and more desired. That is an aspect that we are keenly aware of. Today, we will talk about how we engage the public with web maps and share data in the form of feature services with stakeholders, and the importance of a stable, scalable platform. Now, I'd like to pass it to Will for the next part of our presentation.
Thank you, Chief. And today, this presentation will focus primarily on the power of public apps for damage inspection, and this is targeted mostly to the PIO and the stakeholder in the audience. So public apps are, there's a kind of a broad concept, but the first thing you should ask about them is when you should use them in the emergency event context. So if the event is large and complex, if there's significant public interest, if there's a large impacted population, and if dynamic messaging is needed, then a public app might be right for you. So on the right, on this GIF, you can see that this is kind of the campfire damage inspection app that was developed a couple of years ago for impacted people who wanted to determine if their structure was affected within the fire. All they had to do was through their mobile device or through their desktop, search for the app in their browser. It brought up the application. They were able to click into the application, search for their address, locate their structure, click on the point, and determine its structure status, and also get a picture of it. And I can explain more about the usefulness of that going forward. So just kind of an overview of the configuration, kind of a very broad overview. The first thing that, of course, you want to consider is what layers you want to share. So you want to make sure those layers are built, and make sure that they're stable. If you're collecting data in the field, or if you're bringing in data that's been edited or controlled elsewhere, you're going to make sure that all that is contained in one place. Generally, you want to make sure that it is going to be all on ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise. Whatever system you're using, just make sure that it's stable. All the layers need to have editing turned off unless you want to inadvertently, or unless you want the public to have input on the data that's inside the application. We recommend that all the content is stored into one group. So you can see on the right, we've got a group in ArcGIS Online that is specifically for the Campfire Public app. We've got 3 layers in there, and those 3 layers are used to build a web map, which is in the bottom, and that web map is brought into the application that is then ultimately shared. And all those layers, all that content is then shared publicly. Kind of diving into an often overlooked detail about configuration. The metadata within all this content is important, and especially with the application that is public facing. Metadata is critical for a couple of reasons. One is that it gives your item authority, so people aren't going somewhere else to find the information from a for-profit organization. If it's if the information should be coming from a public jurisdiction, or just, you know, if it's your content and you should be the one delivering the message, make sure that your metadata conveys that you are the authority. And also the metadata helps to refine search engine results, especially with Google. So if you want your information to be the first thing that comes up on a Google web search, make sure that you provide a lot of information within that metadata. And just a few items that are helpful, providing a descriptive title, providing a little bit of a longer description, and that description you can have more keywords in there that you couldn't put into the title. A thumbnail kind of adds to the authority, just kind of a nice aesthetic appearance. And then the terms of use, I can give you some legal disclaimers if you find that important, but also just helps with the overall authoritative look of the application. Again, kind of targeting more the PIO messaging that we think is really important within these applications and for the audience in general today. The splash screen is really helpful for organizing the thoughts that you want to convey to the public who's accessing the app, especially if the information can be sensitive or if it can trigger an emotional response like damage inspection can. The application, the splash screen does a couple of things. Towards the top, we want to convey an essential message. Kind of in the center, we tend to convey the instructions for use. So clicking the point, viewing the photo. You also want to manage expectations. So we do that kind of in the center, where you say if the structure is not identified by an icon, it probably has not yet been inspected. We've also been asked to include a legal disclaimer. So within California, we have Public Records Act requests that are pretty common, and that's where the public can request a lot of government documents. And then they can report, on those documents. So it's a legal process, and accessing the application, you are basically making a Public Records Act request, and then you can see the outline of the government code there. And then finally, we give a thank you, and our thoughts are with you, with the challenging incident. And so the splash screen, what it does is you have to click I agree to the above terms and conditions, and then you're allowed to proceed into the app. So you're agreeing to that legal request. The splash screen is also useful for updating the information as you move forward. So you can see on the left the original splash screen, and then on the right you can see the current one. So the app is still public, even though it's 2-3 years after the incident. You can see that the information was last updated, late or early 2019, and that damage inspection has been concluded. So no information within the app should be changing. Within the application, the only other configuration I'm going to really talk about is an important thing for data for the app sharing and kind of the virality of the app. So you have Esri has built in this really handy share widget, which is just a quick on-off switch that you can turn on with the app or turn off. And what it does is it provides you two things. You can see it there on the left. Is it provides a tiny URL, which is a shorthand URL that's just easy to plug and chug, if you want to share it on social media or Facebook. And then further down, which is really handy, is going to be the iframe. So the iframe is basically an HTML script that allows for the website, the application, to be quickly embedded inside other web pages. And this is awesome because it allows news media outlets to take that iframe and just quickly embed it inside their own web pages, and they can make a story around it. So you can see some examples on the right where local news agencies have brought in that web page, that iframe into their own web pages, and again, it helps to get the message out. It's a really awesome concept. And now Chief Bigelow is going to talk a little bit about how we release the application and kind of the nuances with that.
Yeah, we thought at this point it would be important to make sure that there was an understanding that this is not something that our damage inspection teams, or what we call our DINMs, our damage inspection managers, just unilaterally decide to share in the public sphere. As Will mentioned, this does elicit a very emotional response for a lot of people. This is, their livelihood and their everything, their home, that could or could not have been destroyed as a result of this emergency. So it's important that from the PIO shop that this is a coordinated effort between the damage inspection process and the incident commander. And I'll talk more about how we message that in a minute. But as it's related to the incident commander, that person is in contact with those jurisdictional authorities, whether it be the county board, the city officials, the county sheriff, the police chief, you know, the list goes on, of those stakeholders in that local jurisdiction. And as was mentioned before, that fires or emergencies don't stay within jurisdictional boundaries. So oftentimes we're dealing with multiple jurisdictions. And in some cases, you could have one emergency incident that crosses two jurisdictions, and one is can't wait for us to stand up this product, the public-facing web map, and another doesn't want it. They want to make individual contact with the affected parties before they find it out on social media or any other platform. So there's a lot of nuances that we have to work through as an organization, but ultimately that authority or that decision relies on that incident commander to make finally, based on their interactions with the stakeholders. And then once we do get that approval, then it's a very coordinated effort between the DENS program and the data sharing and the PIO to get as broad of an audience as we can. As you can see in the bottom left of the screen, the most ideal time to do that is to use an official briefing time. So if you have those times set up at 0700 or 1700 or 1800, that you know, you try to put the PIOs try to put the bug in the ear of those newscasters that we have an announcement to make, and it's, you know, you want to do that teased for them so that they want to come see what you have to offer, and then we put that out in the public sphere. So we ask that incident commander to we show them the product, we show them how to use it, we kind of educate them on all the different aspects of it so they can speak to it at the release. And then they make that release, and then I'll have Will talk a little bit more about how we promote the app and in other venues as well.
Great, thank you, Chief. Yeah, and so once the app is released, you know, it's all about getting the word out. So having the IC release it is a great goal to aspire to, and also once it's released, just making sure that you promote it heavily on your organization's social media accounts. So having a Twitter or Facebook is pretty common now for large organizations, and putting it on there is great. And as you'll see in the next slide, if it's released successfully, you know, large-scale release in front of media outlets, then typically, you know, larger media outlets will also pick it up and can do stories on it. And I'll turn it over to watch a video.
Now, if you want to check up on a structure to see if it survived the campfire, CAL FIRE has released an interactive map that could be a useful tool.
ABC 7 News anchor Kristen Z has a closer look at that map.
Here's the CAL FIRE interactive map that could really be useful if you want to check on a particular building. Now you see the town of Paradise. Most of the buildings are in red. Red means the structure is more than 50% destroyed. Orange means 25 to 50% damage. Yellow means 10 to 25% damage. Green means barely damaged. And black, you see a few of those there, means the home has zero visible damage. Now you can search by address. Let's put in 148 Pearson. You can see right there it is in red. I'm going to tap on the attachment. And look at that. You see the picture of the Sierra Gem Company completely burned to the ground. By the way, there's no icon. That means the information is not yet available. It does not mean the building survived. For example, we know one unmarked building is this one, Aunt Mabel's General Store, an antique shop that burned down after we featured it before and after pictures. And by the way, we want to caution you, this data is incomplete and will be changing as inspectors get to more neighborhoods. We have a link to it on ABC7News.com. Kristen Z, ABC 7 News.
Great, thank you. And you can see that a lot of the messaging that the newscaster used came directly from that splash screen, and she read information that was there in the legend, and just followed the symbology directly as we had presented it inside the application, which is exactly what we would prefer. So after the release is performed, you can see, just kind of diving into some of the usage statistics that have been talked about a little bit earlier. These are pretty interesting to look at, and I wanted to kind of talk about them a little more in depth. This is the usage rate that we had for the app over the first year of its release, which is not too surprising. You can see that there's a large spike at the very beginning when there's peak public interest, then it trails off pretty quickly, which is pretty common, I think, for emergency incidents. There's a lot of interest whenever the emergency is affecting you. It dissipates, interest tends to go away. But kind of diving into this curve a little bit more, looking at the usage rate within the first 48 hours, again, going from 1 year to the first 48 hours, you can see when the app was released there at 6 p.m., there was also a pretty large spike. The interest trailed off over the night and then peaked back up and kind of plateaued for the following day. So pretty high interest, pretty high maintained interest, and that's because the application is being shared pretty widely on social media and these different news outlets. So peak of about 50,000 views in the first hour, the public release. Looking at kind of going out to the next 48 hours, you can see there's a pattern that starts to emerge where you've got what's called the diurnal pattern, where you've got distinctive usage rates between the morning and the morning and night, or excuse me, the daytime and the nighttime. With a lot of views occurring during the daytime. You can see there's typically an AM and a PM surge. And something that you may not know, but a lot of the data collection process that we have is typically offline in these remote areas, especially if cell towers have been burned down over the course of the fire. So we're working offline. And so as our inspectors collect data and they come back in and they sync their data, that typically happens in the evening. And so the public, we think the public kind of got used to there being new data appearing, especially towards the evening hours. So there would be a lot of usage rates. The usage would spike again in the evening. Kind of going out to a water time scale for the next kind of the first 6 months or so, you get this pretty distinct weekly pattern going, where the kind of the weekday, Monday through Friday, you've got a kind of a spike that is also a plateau for those 5 days, and then it declines on the weekend. So pretty distinctive usage rates here. So why is that, do you think? Is it folks procrastinating at work, just clicking around, seeing whose house was destroyed or who survived during the campfire? It could be that, but it could also be people using the application for their actual work. So we became aware that the app was being used pretty heavily by insurance companies to assess claims for the campfire. So if someone who's a customer for their insurance company, if they came to them wanting a claim, the insurance company could easily check the app and determine yes or no if their structure was destroyed or not. And because the information was coming from an authoritative source, the state of California, CAL FIRE, that was pretty affirmative that a claim could be processed. And that's important for getting claims out quickly when folks are evacuated, and they need not to process the whole claim of the structural loss, but to get some initial claims going to have money to stay in a hotel room, stuff like that. So talking a little bit more about the insurance benefits. So not only does the app inform the public of their structure status, it allows the homeowner to begin to process insurance claims. And then it allows the insurance company to validate those claims, again, helping to prevent fraud, but also get the claims processed in a more timely manner. And also, NGOs like the American Red Cross will use the application too to get financial resources out to those affected faster as well. Again, they take in this case CAL FIRE's word pretty definitively, and they'll get claims out if a person comes to them wanting assistance and their structure has been documented inside the application. So this whole time I've been talking about the campfire. Campfire, of course, was a very significant event that happened a few years ago. We've used the same process for all the major incidents that CAL FIRE has responded to in recent years. And you can see we have a very standard process on the right. Those are all the apps that were developed for the larger incidents that occurred in the state in 2020. They more or less look the same. So a very standard product. We just repeat more or less that same thing every year with some technological improvement that we think would benefit the application.
And Will, if you don't mind, I'm going to jump in here, talk a little bit about our stakeholder process. So this is a very big deal for us. We oftentimes, as soon as we get a large incident or we get a significantly rapidly developing incident where there's not a lot of data, there's not a lot of information flowing, oftentimes our folks are the first boots on the ground to start assessing the damage, and we start to get pinged from the affected local officials, the affected state officials, the affected United States representatives as well. And all those people want to have a readily accessible data to them in the form of dashboards or just the form of the raw data in numbers, because we have all these different processes that are happening at a time. A disaster declaration by the governor, a federal disaster declaration. We have locals applying for what are called FMAGs, Fire Management Assistance Grants. In all of those cases, it's based on the numbers and the total devastation. And so we as the damage inspection people, are looked at to provide that data to that incident commander in a timely manner. And one of the things that's very important about that process is being organized and making sure that each organization has a view of the data. So as you can see, and I'll let Will really dive into this, we've broken it up into the different organizations for the different event. So they all have their own view of the data, because some only need certain things and some want all of it. So we really try to tailor that to the individual organization that is requesting the data. So I thought I'd jump in here just to kind of explain that process a little bit, and back to you, Will.
Great, thank you, Chief. Yeah, and just to kind of highlight what Frank said, so every jurisdiction or entity that wants the data and should have access to the data, we build a specific group for them within ArcGIS Online, which is there on the left. We then configure the data that they want. We share what's called a view to them. And so you can see there in the middle, all the data sets that the American Red Cross requested and received this last fire year, 2020. And so looking at some of the settings within those layers, we have specific what are called definition queries to only share with them data that has been approved and that has been shared publicly. So it's gone through our extensive QC process. So they're getting verified data. It looks polished and authoritative, which is what we want.
And the reason we do that is the American Red Cross, they're going to have a vested interest in every emergency event that happens across the state potentially. So instead of them having to come to us every time saying, hey, can we see the data? We automatically share the data into that group, so that all they have to do is go to their group every time and they know the data's there. Whereas the city of Riverside, it's not under their sphere of influence to have knowledge about a fire in Humboldt County in Northern California. So we share with them just the city of Riverside data, or the closely related data to them, but in the form of the Red Cross, their data is always there. They can always go to their group and know that CAL FIRE's put the data in there for them to be able to consume. Go ahead, Will.
Great, thank you, Frank. Yeah, and just talking about, so we do have a very standard product. We try to, one of our goals is to make things predictable. Predictability is a little hard with technology because it's always changing. This workflow didn't exist 4 years ago at all, or 5 years ago at all, really, and it looked very different even 2 years ago. But so part of the goals that I have as a GIS person is to stay with the technological innovation that Esri and other partners of theirs and other software companies make within this field, and incorporate those innovations within the program so it helps the public and our stakeholders. Secondly, so there's the technological innovation that drives the changes within the program. But there's also the feedback that we get from the public and stakeholders. So just little things like messaging, the app was easy to access or it was not easy to access, things like that. We really listen to the feedback that we get from the people who use the app and also who use the data. I'll turn it over to you, Frank, for our mission.
Thanks, Will. And as you can see on the screen, we try to live by these, at least for our DINS process. These kind of core values for our mission is to keep the product simple. The last thing we want is somebody to be frustrated in front of their computer trying to figure out how to navigate this system that we've built because we've made it too complex. And all they want to do is find out if their home is still standing or not. So that is always in the forefront of our mind. And that goes hand in hand with number 2, is just make the products easy to use. We just want people to get the information they need to be able to make some decision. And then we want to be able to provide consistency. So as you saw on the previous slide, all of our thumbnails look the same. That way it presents as an authoritative view. So when people see that, they know it's from CAL FIRE. And we provide consistency in the form of our group sharing and the way that we do, the way that we use our metadata, the way that we use our descriptions. All of that is very consistent, and we want to continue to provide that consistency so people know what to expect from us. And then we provide only our core information, of course. We don't want to provide, any personal identifiable information, our PII. But we do provide as much of the core data information as we can, especially with our stakeholders who are just trying to help the people recover from this traumatic incident and try to expedite the process of recovery. So with that, we want to, Will and I both want to thank all of you for joining today, especially Esri for hosting us, and we appreciate the opportunity to show you a little bit about what we do. So with that, Fern, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Frank, and thanks, Will. You both included so much, I think, valuable information. I specifically want to point out the slide that you had before this, where you really are using that same data set to share information internally, as well as be able to view information as a stakeholder and as the public. And while you have different fields and different pieces of the information that gets shared with each different audience, it is all coming from the same data set. So as that gets updated, it's a near real-time process. And so there's no like static or lag in that information. And I think that's really important to be able to include and kind of think about as you build some of these products. Is if you send out just a static map, it's not as powerful, because it is the second you have a print or a screenshot, it becomes outdated because the information in the map does continue to update. So a couple things I want to point out. I want to build on what Will was saying about sharing the web mapping application. If I find a map like this that's severe weather map that someone else has created, I don't want to go to the effort of creating a new map, especially if there's a new incident and things are typically hectic at the beginning. If I have a map that contains most of the data layers that I need, it might not be perfect, it might not include everything I want, but I can use it. So this one, though, is zoomed to the whole Eastern US, and I'm just interested in Washington, DC. So then I'm going to zoom into Washington, DC and click on the share icon in the top right. Will talked about using this to find the link to embed an app in a website or share it to somebody, but I want to share this map while it's zoomed in. So I'm going to click on that link options, and then there's a whole slew of options that I can really customize this map for my use, even though I didn't have to go through the effort or time or knowledge to build it myself. So I'm going to use the current map extent, and the link at the bottom then has been updated to include that extent as part of what gets shared. So that map and others kind of containing those living atlas layers that Mike mentioned earlier are created by the Esri Disaster Response Program and are available to you if you want to use them that way. But if you're sitting and trying to think about, well, usually I show up on an incident and I start making maps, or I get maps from a GIS person, or I find things that are publicly available to include in my map, start planning now, because almost all of this you can do ahead of time. And so you can be prepared when that incident happens, no matter what kind of incident it is. So you can kind of think about, what information am I going to want to include? Do I want just data? Do I want videos, photos, maybe a PDF or a news link? You can create those maps and apps in advance. And it's so important to think about your audience. And I know Frank just mentioned keeping it simple. When you're creating something, think about, are you creating it for one target audience, or are you trying to create one map or application that will cover a variety? And by doing that, is it becoming too complex, and will it create any confusion? So we've shown you a lot of different examples. I think Mike showed a number at the beginning, but I just want to remind you that there are so many ways to share, not only publicly, but also with stakeholders. You can use the web mapping application such as what CAL FIRE is using, or a dashboard. We saw a lot of these during COVID, or a classic story map, or even the new story maps. Now, I really like this classic story map because the author created a welcome message that explains what this is and how to use it. And they have some tips and tricks on different tabs and what you can do with those. Then the new story map is sized for a phone. So that's another thing about your audience. Are they going to be looking at what you create on a phone? And if so, make sure that you test it that way. The new story maps are very responsive, which means that they resize the content that you add in there based on the size of the device that's being used to view it. So what we want to do now is have Jeff give a demonstration on how we could create one of these very quickly. This is not something that is a training, but he will now show us a story map from start to finish. Jeff?
Great, thanks, Fern. And good afternoon, everyone. What I want to do, as Fern mentioned, is show you how to create a story map and kind of walk you through the process. And I'm going to do this as if I were a public information officer or communications staff, not necessarily kind of the GIS staff. And really what we want to share with you is how easy it is to use story maps as a tool to help kind of give your apps and data context to share with your stakeholders about the ongoing current situation. And certainly a lot of great chances to incorporate a lot of the great lessons learned from Will and Chief Bigelow in a lot of their guidance. So I'm going to start here at storymaps.arcgis.com, and I've logged in with my ArcGIS credentials. And in this case, I'm just going to create a new story from scratch. And I'll launch the builder environment here and get us set up. So the first thing that I'll do here is pick a title for my story map. And what we're going to show for the kind of the purposes of illustration here is creating a story map for the Calwood fire that happened here in Boulder, Colorado. This is simply just for the simple purposes of illustrations. We use this for the kind of context of our scenario here. So pick the title here, put in a short description, in this case who we are. I also want to add in and add some context to this, in this case by adding in a cover image. So I've picked a photo here that I want to use as my cover image here for the story map. In this case, it's by default it showed up kind of in the minimal kind of view, but given this picture and this story that we're telling here, I want to expose this now and have this particular image show up in full screen view. Also, a couple of things here. I'm going to flip the knob and dial to turn on the navigation controls, and you'll see that as we start to build this out a bit more. And obviously a couple of other things you can turn and choose in terms of the theme. Next, I'll start to add in the sections to really help kind of tell the story here. First, I just want to highlight that there's many elements here that we can use to tell our story. And these are things that you would typically see in WordPress or making a Facebook post. There's text that we can add, or buttons, or maps and images and the like. So they're real easy to add in a collection of different resources and elements as we tell our story. Well, one of the conventions that we're going to use here today is what's called a sidecar. So what that's going to do is it's going to have a set of panels here. In this case, I'll choose docked, that give me a layout and a set of components here that I can use to tell my particular story. Now, as I mentioned, there's a variety of different media types that we can add and use to add into our story map here. We can use images, videos from YouTube, maps from our GIS staff, additional embeds to other websites, or even a swipe application. We'll show example of each here as we go through and construct our story map. So first, again, I want to create another intro kind of page here, a chance to share any kind of welcome information about our particular story map, perhaps add in some of those instructions or kind of purposes of the application here. So So obviously I'm cutting and pasting some text here that I've already kind of prepared. One thing that I wanted to note here is it's giving us some hints here as a part of the process. It's telling us to add headings to create navigation links, up top. So what I'll do here is I'll highlight the introduction text that I wanted to include and simply click on heading. And now note here that now we've got a specific section link up top to show the various headings as a part of our story. So so the first part's done. We've created our introduction, section. The next section that I want to include, we'll want to include some, live mapping information. So as both Will and Fern highlighted before, hopefully our GIS staff, our GIS information specialists, can create groups of content for us as a public information officer or communication professionals, is really kind of our, our paintbrushes to kind of paint our story here. So whether that's, various web maps or, public information maps to kind of tell, our story. And so one of the things we're looking at here is the live, Boulder public information map. Obviously, we can see the perimeter of the Calwood fire, but thankfully nothing else, going on, today. This is from, obviously a couple of months ago. But this app is ready to go with road closure information, emergency evacuation notices, and the like, shelter information, that type of thing that's ready to go for the public. So now, in the kind of context of our story map, I'm simply gonna, for the purposes of demonstration here, add in, a screen snapshot of what that public information map looked like, back during when the Calwood fire was really going. You can see all the evacuation zones that are, turned on, throughout the area and the like, and the shelters and the roadblocks and everything. So again, now we've added in kind of this next section specific, for a public information map that comes from our GIS staff. As I mentioned, videos are also supported. So if we wanted to add in, YouTube videos to give kind of additional context, for example, whether when pictures of or videos of the fire as it's coming across, or in this case, if I wanted to share information that's coming from the sheriff during, daily briefings, daily media briefings, that's, another way or another, idea that we wanted to share with you today in kind of composing your story map. Also note that we can link out to other web pages or resources if they allow us to embed that material. So for example, if I wanted to link directly to the INSEE website here, specific for this fire, I can do that by putting in the link. And again, on the left-hand side, I'll just, continue building out the story with the description for this, part or this section of the story map that we want to tell. Now, note the website provider needs to give you, basically needs to have the ability to embed those websites turn on. So you may not be able to embed, all maps as a part of your process. Next, what we'll want to show here is including a web map. So we'll pick the add a map option here, and either from my selection here or the group that the staff made available to me, we can use this to kind of start to pick the live mapping information based on information in the cloud that we can share with our audience. There's a couple of quick knobs and dials that we can turn here to perhaps provide a legend, so it makes it easier for the viewers to understand the content. We'll give them some more information. And so now, in this case, I've simply added in a quick progression map here as a part of our story map. And note here that this story map can kind of grow and change over time. So early on there just may be a couple of pages, but as we shift from kind of response to recovery, we can add, continue to add in additional information as the event kind of continues and to unfold, such as post-event imagery. So another element that we can use here, and this is a little bit more advanced, is called a swipe block. So in this case, I can have a web map or an image on the left-hand side and a different one on the right-hand side, and use that to indicate change over time. So for example, now I'll choose the pre-event imagery here to show up on the left-hand side to see what things looked like before. So I'll select that particular web map, and on the right, I'll select the web map to highlight the post-event imagery, for that same area. And now that I've got that set, I can use, this swipe tool to go back and forth and look at the extent of damage, the devastation that was caused by this, particular event. Obviously giving more kind of context here to our story as we're telling this as this, unfolds. And then the last slide that I'll add here as a part of this sidecar series is, after the fact. So for example, if we have information on the post-fire debris flow hazards, we can also include that type of information here, obviously now kind of more from kind of a recovery perspective, and start to pull in, additional information that's provided by partners, by various, stakeholders. We'll continue out to build out the process here. We'll make one last edit here as a part of making this, section heading. And then, okay, that kind of concludes the main kind of components that I want to add here. But at the end of this story, I want to add a final kind of text section that can provide any, specific, contact information. So I'm sharing information, in this case, contact information about the agency. Maybe there's several agencies that we want to include here. Whatever you want to include that you think is appropriate. Obviously the mailing address here, but this could be emails, social media handles, and the like. And so, again, just kind of rounding this out with some of the best practices that we've learned from the community. So that's the final step in kind of configuring our story map here. The last step in the process is to actually publish this. So with ArcGIS Online, we have deliberately simple sharing levels. We can keep this as private and only visible to me. We can share it with our organization. So for example, maybe I want to share this with a couple of colleagues first, or the incident commander as Frank and Will mentioned, or once I'm done, I can go ahead and actually share this with the public. And now it's going to go through the process of publishing this. It's going to check to make sure that all of our content is available publicly, and if not, it will give us some kind of warning messages. And now you've seen just here in a few minutes, I've composed and shared the story map to now, as a public information officer or communication staff, to really tell the story, of this event. The introduction page, the public information map. This certainly could be a live map if you want. YouTube videos, other websites, maps, including swipe maps. Again, looking at things kind of back and forth. And I can either navigate here as a reader by scrolling up and down, or I can use these headings that were set here as I went through and kind of built the process with inside the application. And as Fern mentioned, these apps are responsive in design, so they'll reconfigure to work better on mobile devices, depending on the environment with which your readers are coming, or your viewers are coming in to kind of view this information. So don't worry, a lot of this best practices have already been kind of set for you. And the final thing that I wanted to highlight is the share tabs up here, at the top. We can, provide the buttons to make it easy to share, on your agency's, Facebook or your incidents, Facebook page, share it out via Twitter, or be able to provide the ability to provide the iframe code to embed, make this really easy and to embed either in your agency's websites, or as Will mentioned, make it easy for the media to pick this up and share this on their websites to really help amplify your message and get this information out. So that concludes our kind of quick tour of building a story map and how you can use the new story maps to put your apps in context for your incident or your event. And hopefully you've seen that it's pretty easy to configure, and that you don't have to be a Will, you don't have to be a GIS specialist to do this information. We see that a broad range of users, operations staff, communication professionals, public information officers are able to compose and use the story map tools to meet their mission needs. And so with that, that concludes my portion of the demonstration. And Mike, I'm going to turn it back over to you to help close us out here.
Thanks, Jeff. Great demo. And I want to again reiterate my thanks to the chief and to Will for their excellent presentation and the information provided there. We do have a few questions from the audience that we'll get to. And as we go through those, I'd like to maybe pass them off, to the individuals that are most appropriate to answer those questions. Also, we're putting the resource page up, so you can take a look at that, and please make note of some of the resources available to you that relate directly to the presentation today. But I'll start with the first question, and it will go probably to Will, but Chief, jump in if you need to. It says, for CAL FIRE, did you use the Esri Premium Data Store for peak usage periods? Or in general, how did you prepare for, an app going viral or high traffic for some of your apps?
Yes, that's a great question. And so our organization, through our agreement with Esri, we do use the Premium Data Store. We didn't originally whenever the Campfire app was released. I think that Esri switched us to that because it was creating enough load, and they just wanted to make sure the web traffic was met. So the answer is not originally, but we switched to it, and Esri can do that if the needs are met.
Excellent, excellent. Fern, did you have any additional information you might want to provide on that preparedness?
Yeah, we actually have some really good resources on how to prepare your maps and data for viral or high demand usage. And we're going to cover those in the next webinar on June 9th as part of our tips and tricks.
Excellent, thank you, Fern. And we've got a question about crowdsourcing and the Crowdsource app, and I'm going to give this to Jeff. For the Crowdsource app, members of the public can upload real-time photos, yes or no? And how does the public get access to be able to do this? Jeff, you want to give just a quick overview of that Crowdsource application that's available on the solutions page?
Yeah, think of the Crowdsource way or the Crowdsource app as a mechanism to essentially deputize more GIS staff, and in this case, the public. So you'll create a focused, application that you want to share out through social media or other kind of official channels and broadcast to the public, and then that app will have the ability to upload or include, through the attachment features, photos or videos that are kind of germane to the subject that people are collecting information about. And we certainly see that trend of crowdsourcing damage, really growing, quite a bit, in the community with the, wildfires, hurricanes, and the like over the recent, months. So, yeah, great idea.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And again, as Jeff pointed out, that is an off-the-shelf capability available from our solutions page. So if you go to solutions.arcgis.com and look for that Crowdsource app, you can download and start using it today. In that cloud-based or ArcGIS Online capability. I'll throw this one to the Chief. Chief, are you creating products that are, deal with accessibility issues or multilingual products that you push out to the public?
Yeah, good question. The ability to do that is there. We do have products within CAL FIRE that we obviously build into to meet the intent of the law, especially for ADA compliance, Americans with Disabilities Act compliance. And then for certain ventures that we have within CAL FIRE, we do offer multiple languages, up to 16 different languages in some of our products. So at fire.ca.gov or readyforwildfire.com, a lot of our publications are in multiple languages. As far as the web map as it relates to the topic at hand today, it is only produced in one language, and that is English.
Understood, but the capability is there, and you do address it, and through the technology as well, right? Leveraging the technology to help you address those issues. So,
correct. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir. And I'll go back to the Chief and Will for this one. What kind of pre-work does it require the staff prior to the incident? And then talk about, or they ask about cooperation between jurisdictions. So obviously you're supporting multiple jurisdictions, so there's already a significant level of cooperation there. But if you could speak to that, and what are you doing on blue sky days before the incident hits to prepare?
Yeah, I'll let Will talk about our program setup and how that takes place and when. We just finished up, and I'll just preclude that with, we just finished rolling out our DINS process. We try to time that with the beginning of fire season, and typically CAL FIRE starts fire season May 1st. We are funded through the state to open fire season on May 1st. So we try to time our preparedness for the DINS program with that date. And then as far as the collaboration and cooperation with our stakeholders, yeah, we have pre-season meetings with all of the affected parties. with FEMA, with OES, which is the Office of Emergency Services for California, and we constantly interact and engage with those folks. So we have a face to the name, and we can quickly stand products up and know who to pass those to and know who to notify. So those things are happening all year long, and constantly. We're all on phone calls for various different initiatives together, absent emergency response as well. So Will, I'll let you talk about how we and when we start standing up our processes.
Great, thank you, Chief. Yes, as far as the GIS stuff goes, you know, a lot of the things that I wanted to highlight with our talk was the standardization that we have. And so that basically means having templates. And so yes, we've spent a lot of time developing templates. The templates are, you know, continually changed throughout the year, but once fire season starts, you know, more or less we keep with the same template throughout with some tweaks, minor tweaks therein. But yes, so we have a template database, template dashboard, template web app, all the things that we use, we have templates that we carry through. So yes, that's all done in blue sky days, and then we just use those templates whenever we need to deploy for an incident.
Great, thanks, Chief. Thanks, Will. One last question, and then any remaining questions we'll address through an email follow-up. So please, you know, if they don't answer it during this next few minutes, we'll certainly get to you. But I'm going to throw this one to Jeff Barani. We had a question about, you know, what information or what applications or what mapping products are already available to help develop situational awareness. Obviously, CAL FIRE is putting out information that's amazing, but you know, what else is provided, or what else can an individual get access to help them develop these products for situational awareness?
You know, from a situational awareness perspective, we see a couple of, you know, products that are commonly used. You know, first of all is the operations dashboard, you know, tool, and this is an app that comes with your ArcGIS Online subscription for, you know, combining both mapping information as well as kind of key performance indicators, and that can run, you know, kind of from a unattended kind of display perspective. We also see the situational awareness you know, template used that's built on top of our web app builder app that also comes with ArcGIS Online, and that provides for a little bit more kind of interactivity between, and in terms of understanding the potential impact of an event, how many schools, nursing homes, hospitals, that type of thing could be potentially impacted by a wildfire, or a hurricane, or a flooding event, and that type of thing. So those are, you know, the operations dashboard and the web app builder are two key tools that we see the community leverage for situational awareness purposes.
And then a lot of the data that they can bring into those products could be easily accessed in the Living Atlas and the like, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. Data coming from the Living Atlas, kind of those dial tone services, and then combine that with maybe data from other agencies, or your own kind of status information is hosted feature services from ArcGIS Online. Yep, that's right.
Excellent. Thanks, Jeff. So on the screen now you have our contact information. You know, please write down or take a screenshot or whatever, and you'll again get a follow-up email with additional information. We certainly will address any of the questions we did not get to today and follow up there. And one more of the IMT Disaster Preparedness webinar series is on June 9th. If you register or were registered for today's event, you are already registered for the June 9th event, but please, you know, let your peers or anybody you deem appropriate know of that. It will include GIS tips and technical resources from the team of Fern and Jeff and others on the disaster response program, and really identify some best practices preparing for and responding to these significant incidents. So I want to thank you for spending some time with us today, and please be safe. Talk to you again soon. Thanks.